Right now, I'm so consumed with rage that I can feel it coursing through me, making my hands shake. Tonight, everything I suspected was confirmed. The who is no longer a mystery, and at this point, the length of time hardly even matters. Claire has completely destroyed our marriage, like someone crushing a bug beneath their shoe. At first, I berated myself for not catching the signs earlier, but honestly, after 8 years of marriage, betrayal isn't something you ever expect. For a moment, I thought about drowning my anger in a bottle of whiskey and charging in to confront them, but really, what would be the point? There's nothing left to save in my marriage. The guy could probably flatten me in a fight, and with the connections he has, he could make my life a nightmare, worse, maybe, than him sleeping with my wife. So here I sit, wrestling with emotions that only someone who's been through this kind of betrayal could ever truly grasp. I'm not looking for the hollow sympathy of someone saying, "I've been through a divorce, I get it," or, "Call me if you need to talk." I'm not ready to share this with anyone just yet. What I need now is a plan, but first, I've got to clear my head, and that's going to take some time. The thought of ever being close to Claire again makes my skin crawl. Just picturing her with him, especially in our bed, makes me physically sick. At least she had the courtesy to keep her affair confined to hotels and not bring it into our home. So now, here I am with a notepad in front of me, trying to figure out my next steps. If Claire had fit the cliché image of the temptress, you know, the kind of woman men instinctively watch out for, I might have been more alert, more on the lookout for red flags. But Claire's nothing like that. She doesn't have the stereotypical bombshell figure, the long blonde hair, or the towering presence of some Amazonian model. Don't get me wrong, Claire's attractive in her own way. She's average in height, with a lean, fit build and short brown hair. But standing next to his wife, Claire wouldn't score more than a 5, maybe a 6 on a generous day. So why is he messing around with her? Probably just because he can. About 2 years ago, Claire started working at Carter Industries, not long after Calvin, our son, was born. I made enough money to keep us comfortable, but Claire wanted the kind of lifestyle she saw our friends enjoying, the vacations, the fancy gadgets, the newer cars. "Brian," she said, "if I start working, it'll take some of the financial load off your shoulders. You could stop working so much overtime, and we'd get to see more of you at home." She added, "My parents are willing to help with Calvin, so I could even work part-time." Her reasoning made sense, I'll admit, but I felt strongly that Calvin still needed her at home for a little while longer. What I didn't realize was that she'd already started lining up other options. The first time we met David Carter was at a charity auction, thanks to a pair of tickets my boss handed me because he hated those types of events. I figured it'd be a nice evening out with my wife. When Carter walked in, arm in arm with his wife, it was like the entire room shifted toward him. He was tall, good-looking, and rich, the kind of guy who naturally commanded attention, like a rock star stepping onto a stage. He charmed the crowd without breaking a sweat, leaving most of the women, including Claire, completely dazzled. "That's David Carter and his wife, Emma," Claire whispered to me, her voice full of admiration. "He owns 3 businesses in town, and she used to be a runway model. I bet that dress she's wearing tonight costs more than my whole closet," she added with a tone that felt a little wistful. "Yeah, but I bet they're not even half as happy as we are," I said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "Sure, Brian," she replied, a bit sarcastically. "Wouldn't it be something, though, to have that kind of money? Even just for a little while." Somewhere during the evening, we got introduced to Carter. I can't remember exactly how we ended up talking about our jobs or Claire wanting to get back into the workforce, but it must have come up. It slipped my mind until weeks later when Claire mentioned it again. That night, Carter showed off his wealth by snapping up the top 5 auction items without breaking a sweat. When I joked about him being a show-off, Claire gave me a sharp look and said, "He's doing it for charity, Brian." I wasn't convinced, it seemed more like he was flexing his ability to do whatever he wanted. Guys like him thrive on being the center of attention. One thing that stood out to me at the auction was how David Carter's wife kept a vigilant eye on him, and on every attractive woman in the room. It was like she didn't fully trust her husband, though she hid it well enough. Whatever the case, 3 weeks later, I walked into the house to find Claire practically glowing with excitement. She had landed a new part-time job, and, of course, it was at Carter Industries. "They've just opened up a new department," she announced, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "It's part-time for now, but there's a good chance it'll become a full-time role in 6 months. "That's great news, isn't it?" she added, almost bouncing on her heels. I wanted to say, "No, it's not great at all," but I bit my tongue. The last thing I wanted was to dampen her mood, so instead, I forced a smile and told her I was proud of her. "How'd you hear about the job?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "My friend Linda works there." David asked her if she knew anyone looking for work, and she mentioned my name. I emailed him my resume, but I didn't say anything until I knew I had the job for sure. "I had my interview last week and got the offer the very next day." She repeated, "Isn't it amazing," with a kind of giddy energy. "So, does that mean you'll be working directly with David?" I asked, feeling a slight unease creeping in. "Yes, he and I will be leading a new department that handles all the charitable activities for his company," she replied, still beaming. "That sounds like a pretty involved role," I said cautiously. "It is," she nodded. "I'll be evaluating all the charity requests his companies receive and helping decide where the donations should go. It's a lot of responsibility, but I'm up for it." "I'm sure you'll do a fantastic job, Claire. How about we go out for dinner to celebrate?" I suggested. "We really shouldn't spend extra money right now," she said, shaking her head. "But soon, we'll have plenty to spare." And just like that, it all started. From that point on, it was, "Mr. Carter said this," or "David thinks that." She couldn't seem to go a day without praising how noble and selfless he was. It made my stomach churn. Occasionally, she'd join him on business trips to assess potential donation sites or visit various facilities, but these were always day trips. After all, we had Calvin to think about. "Brian, I'll be out Tuesday evening next week," she mentioned casually during dinner one night. "David is thinking about donating a wing to a small hospital in Alabama. We're going to tour the facility and have dinner with their board. I'll be back Wednesday in time to pick up Calvin from my mom's," she explained. "Why not just come back the same night?" "I mean, I'm guessing you're flying on his private jet," I said, trying to mask my unease. "Mr. Carter doesn't like to rush these things," she replied with a patient smile. "Plus, if anything important comes up at dinner, we'll need to address it the following morning before heading back. It's only one night," she added, flashing me a reassuring look. Even though I wasn't completely on board with the idea, I chose to trust her. David Carter would have to be unbelievably reckless to try something with Claire, considering the wife he had waiting at home. So I wished her a productive trip and joked about needing a little extra affection before she left. "I'll probably need some backup affection Monday night so I don't feel lonely on Tuesday," I teased. She laughed but made sure to fulfill that request, leaving me feeling more than satisfied. When she returned Wednesday night, she doubled down on the affection, and I felt like everything between us was rock solid. Our marriage seemed better than ever, or so I believed at the time. Life carried on, and with the added income, we enjoyed a bit more financial breathing room. But as Claire's out-of-town trips started happening more regularly, about once every couple of months, and the holidays crept closer, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. Before I go further, let me give you some context about my job, because it plays a key role in what happens later. I work for a company that specializes in testing the security of computer systems and firewalls. If someone wants to know how vulnerable their system is to hacking, we're the people they call. With my background in accounting and IT, I mostly work with banks. Usually, a board member hires us to try to breach a specific division or gain access to accounts, essentially simulating a white-collar crime. Around 65% of the time, we manage to break in, and when we do, the bank usually hires us to fix the gaps in their defenses. The most thrilling experience of my professional life happened about 4 months ago. Using a forged Panamanian passport, I casually walked into a local Bank of America branch to open a new account. The bank president himself gave me a personal tour of the facility, fully convinced that I was about to deposit $20 million into their institution. When I expressed concerns about security, he eagerly detailed their protocols at length, reassuring me of their supposed impenetrability. Unbeknownst to him, his confidence only fueled my excitement for the challenge ahead. With all the critical information for transferring funds now in my possession, I assured him I'd complete the deposit the following week. Partnering with Michael, we took just 2 days to breach their systems. We siphoned funds from 4 random accounts and funneled them into the new account I'd set up under an alias company name. Afterward, I reported back to our client, walking them through exactly how we had pulled it off. Naturally, they were both impressed and alarmed, quickly hiring us to fix their vulnerabilities. Although the bank president wasn't exactly thrilled with the results, he managed to keep his job. This is the kind of work I do, and if I'm being honest, I'm damn good at it. Over the past 6 years, I've taken on about 8 different aliases, each supported by flawlessly forged documentation. For most people, these documents are indistinguishable from the real deal, which is what makes them so valuable. Little did I know just how essential they'd become in the near future. About 3 weeks before Christmas, armed with a shopping list and a hefty bonus, I set out to buy gifts. This year, I wanted to go the extra mile and splurge a bit. Among the gifts, I picked up a new iPod for Claire, and when I passed Victoria's Secret, I decided to treat her, and, let's be honest, myself, with something a little special. With the help of a store associate, I selected 2 seductive outfits and headed home, my hands full of presents. Since Claire was still at work, I used the quiet time to wrap most of the gifts and stash them away. Claire had come home earlier that morning from an overnight trip with David but hadn't yet unpacked her suitcase. Feeling productive, I figured I'd help out by putting her things away. I opened the suitcase and started sorting through her clothes, casually tossing them onto the bed. That's when I found it, a fiery red lace outfit, complete with crotchless panties. It was unforgettable, an outfit any man would remember, even on his deathbed. Other than that glaringly conspicuous garment, there wasn't much else of note in the suitcase. I carefully packed everything back in and zipped it up. If there's ever been a literal, smoking gun, that outfit was mine. I had a solid idea of who she was doing this for, but the question that haunted me was, why? We had a good life, a damn good life. But it seemed that Claire wanted more. That moment was the beginning of the end for us. If I hadn't been so trusting, or if Claire had taken the time to unpack her suitcase properly, she might have gotten away with it. I'd have continued on as the clueless, devoted husband. That evening, over dinner, Claire made it clear she wanted to be intimate, but I deflected her advances. I told her I had too much on my mind and wasn't in the mood. The truth was, I needed more than a pair of racy panties to confront her, I needed undeniable proof. Not just for my own peace of mind, but to finally expose David Carter. Given the nature of my work, I knew exactly who to call. I reached out to a friend who had helped our company in the past with similar surveillance needs. The request was simple: keep tabs on Claire while I was away on a business trip to Denver the following week. Ethan, I need you to find out where she's going and who she's meeting, I told him firmly. I have reason to believe she's cheating, but I need solid proof before I confront her. Brian, I hate hearing this, he replied, his tone sympathetic. Don't worry, if there's anything to uncover, I'll find it. With my help, Ethan set up surveillance. We bugged the house, her car, and even managed to conceal one inside the lining of her purse. Claire, I'll only be gone for a couple of nights, I said casually. I want to wrap up this project before Christmas so we can enjoy the full 2-week holiday together. Besides, while I'm away, it's a perfect chance for you to pick up my Christmas gift. After all the nights you've been gone this year, I'm expecting something good, I added, watching her closely for any reaction. She just stared at me silently, offering nothing in return. On Wednesday, I boarded my flight to Denver and gave Ethan the green light to begin surveillance. With Michael already on site, we wrapped up our project earlier than expected, by 6:30 that evening. "Come on, Brian," Michael said as we finished up. "Let's grab a couple of drinks and some dinner. There's a seafood joint just 2 blocks from the hotel, and the waitresses are easy on the eyes." "Give me 20 minutes, I told him. "I'll meet you out front." Before heading out, I called Claire's cell. I wanted to sound casual but also catch her off guard. "Hey, what are you up to tonight?" I asked. "Nothing much," she replied. "After I put Calvin to bed, I'm planning to take a long bath and then read for a bit before turning in." "Love you," she said before hanging up, but I couldn't bring myself to say it back. That part of our relationship felt dead, replaced by a hollow ache of regret. Dinner turned out to be enjoyable, and Michael hadn't exaggerated about the waitresses. After one last drink at the hotel bar, I returned to my room. The blinking message light on the phone caught my eye. The message was short and direct: "Call me." "Ethan, my cell was off," I said when I returned his call. "I figured," he replied. "I didn't want to interrupt your evening, but I've got news. Claire got a sitter and went out to dinner, with David Carter. Afterward, they went to room 312 at the Rada Inn. I couldn't get any photos from inside the room, but I have them both entering, and I'll get shots of them leaving too. I also managed to record some audio, but trust me, you won't want to hear it. He only rented the room for one night, so tomorrow I'll monitor her from your house." "I'm really sorry about this, Brian," Ethan added, his voice heavy with sympathy. "And there's no charge for my work." "She's going to regret ever getting involved with that piece of trash," I muttered, my anger boiling over. Now, sitting alone in my hotel room, I'm consumed with thoughts of revenge. A simple divorce feels far too easy. I need to hit her where it hurts the most, and I know exactly how to do it. This Christmas will be one she'll never forget. By Thursday morning, I had the outline of my plan ready. Most of it couldn't be executed until the 23rd, with businesses closing for the holidays. Armed with one of my forged passports and Calvin's birth certificate, I booked plane tickets under an alias. I chose a roundabout route to make it harder to trace me. The chaos of holiday travel would help me blend in. Next, I took out a cash advance on my credit card to avoid leaving a paper trail. I liquidated all 4 of our CDs from the safety deposit box and withdrew every dollar of available cash. I planned to travel light, bringing only a carry-on, with funds set aside to buy clothes once I reached my destination. The final piece of my plan took 3 painstaking days to execute. Carter Industries had accounts at 2 local banks, one of which I used personally. Using my skills, I hacked into the bank's mainframe, gained access to Carter's account, and set up a transfer of all his funds into our joint savings account. Sounds straightforward, doesn't it? I thought to myself. Wrong. It wasn't simple at all. I needed Michael's expertise to pull this off. Not wanting to involve anyone unnecessarily, I brought him in solely as a backup in case I ran into trouble. Before executing the real deal, I decided a trial run was the safest bet. While we'd handled similar tasks before, every bank security system presented a unique challenge. On the first day, I hit a brick wall with the firewall. No matter what I tried, I couldn't break through. Michael stepped in with some much-needed guidance, and by the next day, I managed to penetrate the system. From there, I spent hours sifting through accounts, painstakingly collecting all the numbers I'd need. The plan hinged on perfect timing. Late afternoon on Friday the 24th, I would transfer funds from Carter's account to mine and then quickly funnel that money through a series of 8 overseas accounts. Timing was everything. In the final week leading up to Christmas, I kept a low profile. Meanwhile, I gathered all the evidence Ethan had collected and made copies to send to Claire, her parents, my parents, and David's wife, Emma. I paid extra to ensure the packages were delivered on Christmas Eve, with everyone except my parents receiving them at the same time. At home, Calvin and I decorated the tree together, carefully arranging all the gifts underneath. Since uncovering Claire's affair with her smug boss, I had kept my distance, cold and unyielding. By now, I was certain she suspected I knew about her betrayal. I packed a small bag of clothes and stashed it, along with a copy of Ethan's report, in the trunk of my car. Everything was ready for the 24th. "Brian, you've been avoiding me all week. Is everything okay? Is there something you want to talk about?" Claire asked, her voice filled with concern. It was time to lay the trap. "Yeah, Claire, there's something we need to talk about," I replied evenly. "But let's not ruin Christmas for Calvin. We'll talk after the holidays." "Well," she said, trying to lighten the mood, "maybe you and I could have a little fun tonight. It's been a while." She moved closer, unbuttoning her blouse. That was it. I had reached my limit. I wasn't playing along anymore. "What's the matter, Claire? Too busy tonight?" I shot back before turning and heading upstairs to the spare room. I shut the door, locked it, and sat down to wait. A faint knock came soon after. "Brian, please. We need to talk." "Open the door," she pleaded from the other side. I'd rather face a gang of angry bikers than have this conversation right now, I thought to myself as I tried to will myself to sleep. Eventually, exhaustion won out, but I was wide awake again just after 7 o'clock the next morning. I dragged myself out of bed, took a long shower, shaved, and prepared for what promised to be one of the hardest days of my life. I needed coffee, lots of it, just to get through the next 24 hours. By 9 o'clock, Calvin was happily watching cartoons, while Claire shuffled into the kitchen. Her red, puffy eyes betrayed a sleepless night. I had no sympathy left to offer. I just needed to make it until 2 o'clock in the afternoon to put the next phase of my plan into action. "How long have you known?" she finally asked, her voice quiet and defeated. "Does it even matter, Claire?" I replied, my tone heavy with weariness. "I guess not," she said softly. "Is there anything I can say?" "What could you possibly say?" I asked bitterly. "That it was just meaningless sex. That you don't love him, only me. That it was a stupid mistake. You could say all that and more, but it wouldn't change anything. I'm taking Calvin to my parents' house this afternoon, and I don't want you to come. You're no longer part of this family. I hope he was worth it, Claire, but from where I'm standing, it doesn't look like he was." Without waiting for a response, I turned and added coldly, "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to load the gifts into the car and get Calvin ready to leave." With the gifts loaded into the car and Calvin dressed and ready, I told him to give his mom a goodbye kiss. Claire had no clue what was coming, and I wasn't about to tip my hand just yet. "When will you be back?" she asked, her voice thick with tears. "When we return," I said bluntly. "Do you have plans to go somewhere?" she pressed. "No," I replied flatly. "I'll be here when you get back," she mumbled, her voice breaking as I closed the door behind us. As we walked into my parents' house, my mom greeted us with a curious look. "When's Claire coming?" she asked. "Do you want the short version or the long one?" I shot back, as my dad took Calvin to the Christmas tree. "She's not coming," I said simply. "She's been having an affair with her boss for a while now." Once the initial shock wore off, I explained to her that Calvin and I would be leaving for a while and would get in touch once we were settled. "Mom, let's not dwell on it, and I won't have to lie to you," I said firmly. "I'm going to make them both pay for what they've done, each in their own way. But for now, let's enjoy this afternoon as a family. I'm not sure when we'll have another chance like this." At exactly 4 p.m., I logged into the system and transferred every penny from David Carter's bank account into the joint savings account Claire and I shared. By 6:30, Calvin and I were on the first of 3 flights that would take us out of the country. I can only imagine how many times Claire called my cell phone before realizing I wouldn't answer. The phone had been switched off and discarded in a dumpster 2 blocks from my parents' house. Just before boarding our next flight, I completed the second step of the plan, transferring the money from our savings account into the first of 8 overseas accounts. By Christmas morning, the funds would be dispersed across all 8. For once, I was going to bring real joy to others on Christmas morning. Checking my watch, I pictured the stunned expressions as my carefully timed deliveries arrived on Christmas Eve. Ethan's updates later filled in the aftermath. According to his findings, Emma had physically kicked David so hard during their confrontation that he needed medical attention. She also demanded he find a way to restore their financial losses. Meanwhile, Claire's parents weren't any kinder. They made it painfully clear how disappointed they were with her choices. By the time Claire realized Calvin and I weren't coming back, she had received my package, a collection of photos, audio recordings, and a letter explaining everything. I didn't mince words. I detailed how I had discovered her affair and why forgiveness wasn't an option. "You don't deserve the love of me or Calvin," I wrote. "From this day forward, you won't have it. The house and everything in it are yours to do with as you please. Calvin and I are starting a new life without you. Maybe one day, I'll find it in my heart to forgive you, but I don't see that day coming anytime soon. Since you and David began your affair under the pretense of charitable work, I decided to help you both live up to that image. The $1.2 million from Carter's account has been donated to 8 children's hospitals in developing countries, in Carter Industries' name. They've been instructed to formally thank Carter Industries 1 year from now. You can let David know that I hope he enjoys his new reputation, and that you'll be the most expensive mistress he's ever had. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. As for me, I'd like to say, see you around, but we both know that won't happen. I'll keep my mom updated about Calvin, so if you manage to stay on her good side, you might get some news. And if you want a divorce, feel free to file. I won't contest it." By Christmas morning, Calvin and I had arrived in Panama. I'd rented a 2-bedroom condo just outside downtown, using some of the money I'd rerouted from Carter Industries to cover the cost. The lower cost of living meant we were financially secure for now, but I knew I'd eventually need to find work. For the first few weeks after we arrived, Calvin would ask about his mom occasionally, but over time, the questions stopped. I hired a live-in nanny for a reasonable cost, and the 3 of us created a new version of family life. Even with a tight budget, I managed to start my own software protection company. I avoided targeting big banks at first, but as my reputation grew among smaller, independent institutions, they began seeking me out for their security needs. 5 years after settling into our new life, there was an unexpected knock at my door. "I knew it had to be you as soon as I heard about a new competitor starting up here," Michael said with a chuckle. "So, aren't you going to let me in?" We spent over 2 hours catching up before heading out for dinner. During our conversation, Michael shared some updates that filled me with satisfaction. Carter Industries' board of directors had been furious about the mishandling of charitable donations and had voted David Carter out as company president. The $1.2 million loss, combined with his divorce from Emma, had nearly bankrupted him. As for Claire, she was fired after it was discovered that the funds had passed through our joint savings account. While there was talk of pressing charges, she was eventually cleared of any wrongdoing. "When I heard about the mess they were in, I just knew it had to be your handiwork," Michael said with a grin. "I figured you'd skip town, and when I heard about a new security firm making waves here, it wasn't hard to put 2 and 2 together." He slid a contract across the table. "The Home Office has an offer for you," he continued. "They're willing to either buy you out or bring you on as the head of the new Southern Division. The salary's based on U.S. standards, so you'd live like a king down here with way less responsibility. Think it over. I'll be back by the end of the week. Michael stayed with us for 3 days. We indulged in great food, drank a little too much, and Michael even found himself enchanted by a couple of local ladies. When he left, he carried a signed contract in his pocket, a broad smile on his face, and a letter for Claire, along with some pictures of Calvin. Dear Claire. As you can see from the photos, our son is growing fast. He attends a small private school here, and he's become fluent in Spanish. Honestly, he might be better at it than English now. He's also picking up Chinese since about a quarter of his classmates are of Asian descent. His computer skills are remarkable, and by the time I'm ready to retire, he'll be more than capable of taking over the business. He knows about our separation, but I've never told him why. He's accepted it as normal that he lives with me while you live elsewhere. For obvious reasons, I couldn't share my location with anyone, and I understand both our parents were upset after I left. Mom eventually forgave me and passed along everything I sent you, so at least you've been kept in the loop about Calvin's life. For what it's worth, I've forgiven you. My new partner helped me realize I was carrying too much emotional baggage and that it was time to let go and move forward. It's a shame things turned out this way because you would have loved it down here. I don't plan on coming back. Mom and Dad are thinking about buying a place here for the winters, so there's nothing left for me up there. If you ever want to see Calvin, you'll need to make the trip down here, at least for now. Mom doesn't mention you, and I don't ask, but I hope you've managed to rebuild your life after losing your job. I can't help but smile, though, knowing that David lost everything. Karma has a way of catching up, doesn't it? That's all I have to say. I hope you find someone you can truly be faithful to and that you move on with your life. As for me, I've found someone special. She treats Calvin like her own and brings happiness back into my life the way you once did. We're not married yet, but it's on the horizon. Calvin will have a baby sister in the spring, and it's time for me to take the plunge again. Best wishes. Brian. You're welcome to write to Calvin if you'd like, but this will be my last letter to you. Brian. Claire sat quietly as she read the letter, her hands trembling and her eyes filled with tears. Each word seemed to cut deeper than the last. In the days that followed, she severed all ties with David for good. The scandal had left her reputation in shambles, making it nearly impossible to find steady work. Jobs were scarce, and any men who expressed interest in her either weren't serious or were only looking for a fling. Now, she's dating a salesman from out of town, but they're taking things slow. The photos of Calvin, looking healthy and happy, brought a bittersweet mixture of relief and heartache. She longed to hold her son again, but with her finances stretched thin, especially after losing the house during the housing market crash, visiting him seemed like an impossible dream. Claire often found herself lost in a cycle of what-ifs, replaying her choices and regretting the path she had taken. But no amount of dwelling on the past could undo the damage. All she could do now was carry the weight of her mistakes, learn from them, and hold on to the hope of a better tomorrow.